Hi, everyone. You're listening to the Engineering Politics Podcast. I'm Kevin, your host, and your guide through this dumpster fire that is our political landscape. Today, I'm joined again by none other than the always amazing Deb Fillman of the Reason We Learn channel and community. Deb is a former educator, current parent, and future YouTube star. In this podcast, we talk more about the problems in our education system, the hero complex we see with educators, and the intersection between education and politics. We also read comments and take questions from listeners because, remember, this was a live stream on Deb's YouTube channel. You can find Deb and join future live streams by going onto the YouTubes and searching The Reason We Learn. Make sure to subscribe. Her channel is amazing. You can also join her community and support her on Locals by going to thereasonwelearn.locals.com, and you can give her a follow on Twitter at InsomnoChick. And now I get to tell you where you can find me. Y'all know where to go by now. Catch me on Twitter at ENG_politics. Search me out on YouTube by just searching Engineering Politics. You can join my ThinkSpot page by going to ThinkSpot and searching Engineering Politics. And you can join my growing community on Locals where you can support me monthly and you can get Locals exclusive content like my premium video series, Another Round with Kevin, by going to engineeringpolitics.locals.com. I'd appreciate you joining and your support. All right, let's get to it. This is the Engineering Politics Podcast.
Welcome to people who are just joining us to the Engineering Reason podcast and live stream. For those of you who are here for the first time, or if you're here on the replay, this is Kevin and I'm Deb.
Hey guys.
Kevin is from Engineering Politics. I am from The Reason We Learn, right here, of course, where you are located. And this is where politics and education meet and become culture.
Yeah.
At least that's how I think of it anyway.
You saying politics and education haven't already met? Because it kind of seems like it has.
Well,
Could you even tell the difference?
No, right? And I think that's one of the things we want to talk about, right? One of the things we want to talk about is how they're increasingly becoming one. So before we came on here, guys, anybody who's watching, we were talking about how people are starting to make noise about CRT in the classroom. CRT, for those of you who are new, is critical race theory. And I'm not going to go into the whole history of it and everything, but it's been in the schools for quite some time. In fact, I just found a paper that I wrote in grad school in 1989 and I put it on my Locals. I was reading the intro to it. I'm like, oh my God, this was my exam. And I got an A and I answered it the way the professor wanted. And I'm like embarrassed. I'm ashamed of myself that I'm like, yes, these inequalities are perpetuated in the society, blah, blah, blah. And I know better, but I knew what it was an exam question and I knew what he was looking for. And I answered the question the way he wanted and I got a good grade. But yes, they were teaching it even then. And so here, fast forward to the present, you've got teachers who were all educated this way, that like, this is the truth. And now parents are starting to wake up to like, wait, what is this stuff? You're teaching my kid that America is a systemically racist country and our founding documents are racist? Wait, what? You know, because even when we were kids, Gen X over here, we weren't told America was perfect, but we were told that the Constitution was pretty cool. I mean, I remember the Miracle on Ice. Communism was bad. You know, like there were some basic things that we all took for granted, like liberty is a good idea. And so now parents are starting to say, no. But the pushback is getting pushback. So now what I'm seeing is the people in the schools, the teachers, the administrators, the Secretary of Education himself, Randy Weingarten, a bunch of other people are saying, well, this is the right. These are the right-wing Republicans are fighting back because they want to preserve their power, and they're making it, as critical race theorists do, they try to do this to everything, they're making it all about politics when for us parents and caring teachers and taxpayers, it's about worldview. It's about philosophy. It has nothing to do with politics. Most of the people I know vocally fighting this thing would actually call themselves liberals. Many of them probably voted for Biden. They just happen to actually believe in classical liberalism, where you have viewpoint diversity.
Is that a point you made in a previous? I'm trying to remember because I've been listening to a lot of you and Carlin Borosenko at the same time, and I don't remember who made the point that the people who are pushing back on this are not the crazy right wingers. It's mostly liberals.
No,
So
they're
I
not.
mean, as a conservative,
Yeah.
as a card carrying, I got it in my wallet somewhere that says I'm a conservative. Always been this way. Hashtag Liz Cheney. I'm just kidding, not her. But I mean, Liz Cheney does kind of represent a lot of mainstream conservatism who hasn't completely bought into the CRT idea or doesn't believe either that it exists or that it's big enough to care about.
Right.
So, to your point, it is a lot of the liberals who are screaming about this because CRT is naturally illiberal.
Yes.
And if they try to, and I don't really even see the CRT types even trying to claim the label of liberal anymore. We're normally the progressives. They've always tried. It's like, well, I'm a liberal. It's like, you're progressive. You're progressing away from liberalism. That's the problem. You don't really believe in true liberalism
Right.
anymore. But it's the liberals pushing back against this most fearlessly. And they're the ones who are standing up in those clips you see online. And there's a great clip that came out recently of a black woman who's like fighting against this, saying like, I don't want this being taught to my kids. I don't
Loudoun
want this being
County.
taught, right?
She was
And yeah,
awesome. She was amazing. I was just like, whoa,
but it
bravo.
isn't some sort of QAnon conspiracy theorist coming out of the woodwork and saying, I don't want you teaching CRT to my kids, and I also don't want you teaching them that the earth is round. Like, it's not, these people are not the people showing up to these meetings and pushing back against us. It is the true liberals, and it's, I don't know the best way to reach out to my people, right? Like to wake them up and say, this is something you need to fight against too, because it's your problem as well. Your kids are also getting educated in this, and it can't just be left up to the liberals to do this alone.
Right. And I can't decide if it's a function of them sort of not really being dialed into it because either they're kind of focusing on other things right now, like how the Republican Party is kind of fragmented and falling apart. It's like, they're not as right now. The conservatives, if you will, is such a fragmented group of people politically. And there isn't a strong voice or even a couple of strong voices who carry a torch for what those values are, on that side to really step up. And it feels like they're so busy with infighting and all this kind of stuff that's going on. They're just not really dialed in. Or add that to the fact that a lot of people who are already on the conservative side either already homeschool or already have their kids in private or parochial school because of their values, and they're already looking to pass their values on to their kids, or their kids go to public school, but either they live in a red state or they feel like, well, I teach my child at home about these values, so I feel like I've protected, like they'll be okay. Like, I don't think they understand the level of threat. And so I think that's a piece of it. I think what you said is a piece of it. I think also there is a component that is like, the schools and education, everything is so dominated by Democrats. The teachers union, all that. Like, it's almost like, being the lone person showing up, all by yourself to have an argument in a crowded room with a bunch of people. It's like, I feel like people just don't really want to touch it. And that's too bad, because we don't have when I say we, I mean people who are traditionally on the side of conservative values or libertarian values, whatever. Just there's no one stepping forward. So it's ironic to me that people are saying, oh, it's the right, when it's like Reason Magazine and Barry Weiss and Fair for All and No Left Turn in Education, and like all these organizations that, well, No Left Turn in Education is conservative, but a lot of the others are right down the middle. I would say they're more centrist, center left, even.
Yeah. So I understand, because conservatism pre 2015, pre the Trump phenomenon, they had two basic modes. One of them was, I'm going to sit at home with my guns and CRT can't get me there. And the other mode was free market is our main principle. And if it does not, if for some reason the free market can't push back against it naturally, then it ought not to be done. And this is kind of the Ayn Randian mode of that it's all going to work out as long as the free market can thrive. Now, there's a problem in the free market when it becomes, a cartel, and people are not allowed to do anything for fear of getting whacked and a drive-by, because they're not allowed to say these things socially. So those are the two main modes we had, and Donald Trump has fortunately kind of come back and able to give some people a bit of a backbone. The joke is if President Trump were to unfortunately pass away, I hope he donates his brain to science and his backbone to the Republicans, or his spine to Republicans, and hopefully that idea is going to kind of infect conservatism a bit more and give them a backbone and help them understand that you have to push back against the social and cultural sicknesses, diseases, effectively what it is. And if you don't, it's going to come and get you. It doesn't matter how many guns you have or how insulated you are from the rest of the world, the rest of society. It's going to come at you, and you can't just sit there and take it.
No. And you know, no matter how much people might disagree with specific things he says or does, and I mean, obviously I disagree with his financial policies of Trump.
Same here.
Yeah. It's like, you might as well be Democrat. But anyway, I do think you're right about the spine, in the sense that, here's a person who was not afraid to speak. And I'm going to say this, and people are going to laugh at me, but truth to power. People say, what are you talking about? Is it like the president of the United States? I'm like, yeah, except when you look at the actual power, like who is really wielding power at the time when he was president, you had the media, you had Congress, okay? And you had, in terms of education, it's just so dominant. Entertainment, media, education, all of the institutions that make up our culture, that are responsible for taking care of it, perpetuating it, teaching it to other people, were absolutely 100% dominated by enemies of him personally, and enemies of conservatism, and enemies of America. I mean, I'll go all the way and I'll say enemies of the Republic. And so for somebody to stand up, however ham-fistedly, awkwardly, like cringingly, like cover your eyes, please say something different, I will say at least he would do it. He was unafraid to do it. And we have very few people now. I think Ron DeSantis does that. But, people keep forgetting that, when you mention the free market, and it's funny because I'm more Randian than anything, right? Mm-hmm. And I will agree with you that despite my philosophy, I feel like without a well, actually, not despite it, because of my philosophy, that you have to have a solid core. You have to basically have the right values. And in this case, I would say individual liberty, the rights of the individual, okay? In order for you to espouse things like, the free market. The free market is, what is it without virtue, without that virtue? Because first of all, define free and define market, right? And so I'm still going to go a step backwards, and I'm going to go back to the core philosophy. And what we lack, and certainly the conservative side lacks, in my opinion, is a core. I don't see a core there that is defending individual liberty. And that's why I find it deeply ironic that the people who are doing it every single day, they're sticking their necks out and doing it, are the ones that people on the actual right tend to make fun of. The liberals, okay? They're the ones actually speaking up and saying, hold the phone, this is not okay. And then the people on the other side, the pro-CRT people, are accusing all of them of being right-wingers. And the only reason I think, I don't know how to explain my reaction to that, because I'm not right-wing, but I wouldn't have ever called myself liberal in the way that maybe they do. I would say classically liberal, right? Individualist. But when I know there are people who are Democrats who are voted for Biden, et cetera, and, I'll forgive them if they understand their mistake. But, in terms of CRT, the people who said, it'll be easier to fight it with Biden are now going, oops, I was wrong about that one.
Yeah,
so
I don't know how you get to that.
I don't know how you got that, but I have heard a few people say I was wrong. Some of the key people who refuse to admit they're wrong, they can jump off a cliff. But those who are ready to stand up now and fight, I welcome them with open arms, and I am standing shoulder to shoulder. But what I would say to them is, with a piece of me, again, because I'm not a right winger, okay, is welcome to my world. I have lived in this space where you are now standing probably for the first time in your life. I have lived here since I was 15 years old. Since I was 15 years old, I have been the out person in any room. I've been the person saying, I dissent, and having people go, you're a terrible person. You're racist. You're bad. You're evil. You're this, you're that, because you don't agree with us. The groupthink was strong throughout high school, college, graduate school. And like I said, I graduated college in 87. Reagan was president. So I feel like, I want to say that to them, not out of spite and not to rub their noses in it, but to say, I hope you take this opportunity while you're fighting this battle to understand that there are many, 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 many people out there, kind of like me, who've been fighting it in our own small way for years. And in order for us to come and join you, I'm there already because I'm a glutton for punishment. But I bet there are a lot of people sitting on the sidelines who are either afraid to voice their opinion because they're afraid of being canceled, or there is a little piece of them that's kind of spiteful. It's kind of like, oh, so now you don't like it. You know what I mean? Like the welcome to my world, but with a little edge.
Right.
And I think there needs to be a little bit of outreach. I think there needs to be some outreach to say, all right, you know what, guys, we have learned that it probably it was all nice and well and good when we functioned very nicely in our little bubble and everything was going great and our kids were happy and we got great jobs and we could go to a cocktail party and everybody liked us and we didn't have to worry what we said. We could just go on about the president and everybody agreed with us and so forth. And we didn't have to bite our tongue and whatever. And I hope now they realize that's a bad habit to get into. Like they should never do that again. Like even if we get rid of critical race theory, even if they go start a new school, even if we can, fix this, I think people need to take a step back and say, let's not do that again. Let's really champion viewpoint diversity permanently. Like not just to get rid of this little poison, but to get rid of it, the chance of it coming up again, because it came to be because it was okay. And we talked about this before we came online, how some of the teachers now are saying, I'm going to teach it anyway. Why are they so bold? Why are they so brazen? They're not brazen because the right wing is so powerful. They're brazen because for so many years, that side, the left side of the world and everything dominated education, dominated the academy, dominated media, dominated everything, and nobody complained. Nobody had a problem with it until it was their kid being told you're an oppressor. Everybody was okay with it. Okay? And so I think they need to realize like you kind of built this a little bit. I'm glad you're saying stop. But you also need to really cover your bases. It can't just be in education. You've got to also look at the universities. You've got to also look at politics. You can't keep the two things separate. You can't keep your politics in a nice little bucket over here and be all like, oh yeah, Trump was horrible and terrible, but my school. No, they go together. If you cried when Trump was elected, if you told your kids what a terrible black day it was, or if you just spent 4 years making fun of him and rolling your eyes in front of your children or whatever else you did, and now today you're like all upset about critical race theory, I kind of want you to have a little bit of moment of self-reflection and say, maybe I kind of sort of participated in this a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it helps certainly to know, what part you played into it and to understand not to do that again, and when it comes to viewpoint diversity, I think it's a bit of a symptom of what's happening now. Viewpoint diversity gets eliminated once a bad ideology takes power. And sometimes it's that absolute liberalism by allowing the bad people through the gate, if you will. So those, conservatives are really good at allowing bad people through the gate in a Trojan horse, where sometimes people who are the absolute liberals, sometimes they're even on the libertarian side, will just like, no, come in. Our ideas are going to fight your ideas until they take power and don't allow you to share your ideas at all.
Right. You have to really mean your liberalism every day.
Right.
You've got to live it every day, even when it hurts. Like when Trump got banned from Twitter, if you weren't one of the people, even if you hated his guts, if you weren't one of the people who said, no, that's the sitting president of the United States. Like if you want to put a little warning next to his stuff, I guess it's your platform, do what you want, but you're banning the president of the United States. Like I sort of judge by who was really liberal and who wasn't. by who said that's not okay, even though I hate him, and who said, yeah, good riddance, get rid of him, get rid of all of them. And now I'll see some of the same people, and I made mental note of it. I made mental note of who did it. And now I'll see some of them coming out knowing, going, oh my goodness, the schools. And I'm like, I wonder if there's a connection, And like I said, I don't say that out of spite. I say that because this is a philosophical fight. This is not a political fight. It's only a political fight because people's philosophy is so lousy. So if you really are championing liberal values, you have to champion liberal values every freaking day in every arena of your life. You cannot confine it to where it's affecting you right now, or it's affecting your babies, or it's affecting your job. You have to actually live that creed.
Yeah, and another part of this is understanding the end goals of some of these people. I have a big problem with, especially as a conservative, when people throw the name conservative out there. Half the people understand what it means, but might disagree with it, and the other half is like, "Oh, you just want slavery back" or something like that. And it's like, well, no, you're straw manning my end goal.
Like
the best thing to do is to listen to what they say their end goal is, and if you listen to the CRT types, what their end goal is, it's drastically. They believe in what they say because what they say is not your end goal. You want prosperity; they don't want prosperity; they want equity. This is something pulled straight out of an Orwell novel. And so to understand that, I mean, I've had a really busy work week, and it was really hard for me to like bust out content and stuff like that. But it went really, really fast, and it's because I enjoy the challenge of the engineering. My day job, I enjoy that challenge. But then I look to the CRT stuff, and when I started my content, I wasn't talking about this kind of stuff. I was talking about economics and culture and different stuff like that. And I'm like, this is a challenge to me, but why am I not enjoying this challenge? And I finally thought to myself, I'm like, in an engineering challenge, an engineering problem, we're working toward the same goal. We want this part to function properly in its application. When I work in economics, we want poor people to not be poor anymore, even though we have different ways to get there. So the way I think about it is, if we disagree, we might agree on the end goal. We disagree with the road you take to get there. If I want to go to the grocery store down the street, my idea as a conservative is like, okay, I'm going to take the road and just drive there. My liberal friend is going to be like, well, let's walk or take the bike path to get there. Two different options, but they'll both get you there. And then you have your crazy progressive or crazy right-wing friend who's like, let's get there by going headfirst into a wood chipper. And it's like, no, you go there in the corner, you play with your blocks and your colors and let the adults talk. But that's kind of how the order of operations went. But now we have these CRT types who are like, you shouldn't be going to the grocery store at all because the grocery store is an institution of systemic racism. It's actually better to sit here and starve instead of going to the grocery store so we can all starve to death equally.
Right.
That is what they want. And that is understanding. And they're explicit with this end goal. They don't say we want everyone to be more prosperous. We just want equity in our total end game there. And it's important to understand the end game and to be clear, this is not a commentary on race or anything like that. It's a commentary, on culture and human behavior and incentives and disincentives. But when they turn the free market, it's hard to understand true incentives and disincentives when they say the free market is a zero-sum game. If I have more food on my table, that means you have less food on yours. That is how they teach people.
False. I mean, the thing is, Kevin, is like, Thomas Sowell is, to me, like, yeah, okay. But
I've heard of him.
But where are the people in politics? Like, the thing that the left has, the thing that the Democrats have, is they have so many people who do such a great job. I mean, let's give it to them. They do a fantastic job of advocating for their agenda. Now, their agenda, I think, is morally bankrupt. It is factually wrong. I mean, there's so many things wrong with it, but I'm not going to take away from them the fact that they do a fantastic job. Now, Thomas Sowell even says they have an easier job because their job, it's very emotionally satisfying to think of I can have everything I need and want, and someone else will pay for it. That's an easier sell for the average person. Okay. Especially the average person educated in our public schools who doesn't understand economics, doesn't understand, scarcity, doesn't understand any of these things. But it's not an excuse. The fact that they have an easier job, the fact that they're selling to an audience that isn't really all that well educated on the particulars, is not an excuse for people on the opposing side, the people who disagree with that agenda, to not spend most of their time, and I mean this sincerely, literally like 80 to 90% of their political time coming up with better arguments that are not just the better argument. We have the better arguments, but packaging it, marketing it, putting it out there for public consumption. The Democrats do that every freaking day. And now they've successfully done it in our schools. And so parents have an uphill battle. The parents who are waking up to the toxicity of this are like, like help. And I'm sitting here daily like, okay, here's what these words mean. And here's what you can say. And here's a principled argument. But first of all, I can't reach everybody. Second of all, the parents shouldn't have to do this all by themselves. The politicians who took their money, and it's not just Democrats who did it either, okay? It's all of them. So the politicians who are taking their money and promising them schools and promising them that their kids are going to get an education. And even the Republicans are like, oh yeah, funding for education, whatever. The Civic Security Democracy Act is bipartisan. I'm so angry because I feel like you spend 9 out of 10 hours in terms of political rhetoric talking about stupid things. I mean, things that don't matter, like this Liz Cheney thing. Look, I can't stand her, but who cared? Like, seriously, who cared? Are there like 5 people on planet Earth who cared about whether she continued to occupy that seat or not? Nobody who mattered. They should have been spending all of their time in the last month making better arguments against everything that's going wrong in this country. But no, instead, Liz Cheney. Or, they're not coming up with better arguments against CRT. And I don't mean validate the need for something with an alternative thing. That's what Republicans always do. Well, let's do this thing instead. It's like, how about let's not do this thing at all? How about this is no place in K-12 education? And I don't see anybody. I mean, the last passionate defense of anything common sense I saw was Rand Paul taking that woman to task over transgender children and stuff like that. That's the last time I saw somebody really bring it when it comes to defending reason in the Republican Party. And so it drives me crazy because when people say, oh, you only oppose critical race theory because you're on the right, it's a right-wing conspiracy theory, I have to turn around and first of all say, little me, have to turn around and say, no, that's not true. You're gaslighting and you're making a straw man argument and all these things. I have to do it, and all the other people who are fighting have to do it. And I look over to the people who are being accused, the Republican Party is trying to do this, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, do, crickets, nothing. It's like, hello? Anyone? And
we don't have an institutionalized racism problem. We have an institutionalized stupidity problem. And it's infecting both sides because the momentum is on because, like I said, they're the ones with institutional power. Mm-hmm. They absolutely have institutional power. So the easiest thing in the world to defend critical race theory is politicize it, which of course is what it is. It's a political tool. So it's just like, oh, it's just you right wingers. And it's like, what right wingers? Where are they? Let me look. Are they under this rock over here? They're MIA. It's not that I want right wingers to come out of the woodwork. I would just like some voice of reason to come from the side that is supposed to be the loyal opposition and say, hey, what happened to the Freedom Caucus? Hello? Where are these people who are supposed to be the political representatives of the Constitution? Remember the Constitution? It's like Rand Paul and Thomas Massey. They're like 2 people. Where is everybody? It's literally like they disappeared or they're so busy fighting a bunch of, I don't know what the heck they're fighting. They're fighting about nothing anyone cares about. We, the people, are hurting. We, the people, it's really the midterms, if they are actually real, are theirs to lose. And they're going to lose them if they keep going like this. This is unforced error after unforced error of just silence. Now, the governors are doing great things. The governors, I got to hand it to them. They're doing great things. But without somebody at the federal level to combat the Department of Education madness and the president's agenda and the massive push for gigantic amounts of money, backing this up, and not just backing this up, but backing up the teachers' unions, these poor governors are going to be like, is anyone there? Hello, Washington? Hello?
I can pass these laws banning critical race theory, but if you're going to then fund it in all the blue states that ask for it, or you're going to put me on the hot seat because there's $1 billion now sitting there for states to teach this stuff that I just outlawed.
Right.
You're literally setting me up to lose re-election. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that's the part with the political game, especially at the federal level, where they have one hand trying to fight for what they think they want or what they think you want, and they have the other hand and like, I need to keep on the campaign trail so I can stay in power to half.
Yep.
But I don't know if you can swear on here and keep your live stream going, but yeah, half butt it, I'll say.
Yeah.
Instead of full butt it.
Right. They've got to be, I think, here. So Sean says, Freedom Caucus announced a bill today to ban CRT in federal government contracting and military. Yay. I mean, no, that's great. But there's, and the problem is they introduced a bill, and at this stage in the game, it probably won't. I mean, at least they're doing something. I think that's great. But what I would really like to see is and this is where the Republican Party is abysmally bad, and the Democrats are rock stars at this. I hate them for it. But they need to get like all the governors, all the red state governors together and with one loud voice, and the Freedom Caucus and it's like get just like almost a huge organization of people together and include some concerned Democrats, because there are some, okay? And so that it's not exclusively right-wing, but really form a coalition of the willing, a coalition of the classically liberal, if you will, the people who are saying, we're going to set aside our differences in solving problems of, whatever, transportation, infrastructure.
I'd be interested to see how much it'd be difficult at the federal level to get any Democrat to come out, just because it's going to be political suicide for them.
At the same time,
Joe Manchin might be the only one I can think of, and even he, as long as he doesn't have to stand for anything.
Cinema, she might do it. Is Tulsi Gabbard? So I mean, she's
not in power.
I know, but maybe she could.
But yeah, she's a great one. That I really hope that a lot of people, especially started her own locals community. I hope like she's just a thriving community of true liberals and stuff like that, because that's going to help, because she's a powerful voice there. But they label her, she's a right winger now, just so you know, if you haven't heard.
But that's the thing is that I think if at one time. Wasn't it who was it? Newt Gingrich sat down with somebody, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, I could have smacked him. But anyway, he sat down to for the environment or whatever they did. But I think we need to have some leadership. There's no leadership. There's no political leadership in defense of critical thinking and reason and viewpoint diversity and real freedom of speech. We're not talking about, because what they're doing now is they're saying, oh, it's a freedom of speech issue. And as Carlin has tried to point out, and I mean, I'm just going to echo what she says, and hopefully people will take it from here and echo it in their own lives. The government doesn't have freedom of speech. The government doesn't have unlimited freedom of speech. So the government employees in your schools and in government workplaces and so forth do not get to say and teach and push whatever they want. If they did, they could start teaching your kids religion. They could just got teachers who work for the government could go into the school and start teaching all your kids to be whatever, pick a religion out of a hat. They can't do that. That's not okay. You have freedom of speech, not the government. And they're supposed to protect you from the imposition of these ideas, because that's the opposite of freedom of speech. Is not just you get to say what you want. It's also you get to not say what you don't want to say. And you get to be free from the imposition or demand that you espouse certain views or say, loyalty oaths and all these things went by the wayside a very, very long time ago. And even when they existed, the reason we were able to get rid of them is the ACLU correctly said, this is unconstitutional to have loyalty oaths and all this kind of stuff, that have it actually mean something, have it teeth, like you can't get a job or you can't do this, you can't do that. Now, you do have to take an oath when you serve the public, but your children should not have to sit there and affirm or profess that they commit to do the work of anti-racism or whatever. Your kids should be able with impunity to sit in a class and go, nope, I'm not going to do that. Disagree. Not going to do it. Because none of this ties to any kind of standard for basic skills acquisition. So, what the states are starting to do in some cases is have critical race theory tenets tied to state standards. Like Washington just passed a law that you will teach this in the schools, and they're going to be evaluating the students on how well they can spit back this stuff. And I hope to God somebody sues, because you shouldn't be grading a child on how well they agree with you that this branch of social science is correct, because it's social science. It's not biology. It's not math, etc. And that's what they're doing, is they're saying this is the truth. And you mentioned before we came on, you thought it might be a good idea to have the kids learn another worldview, or actually learn about religion, like for real in the public school, not as the faith, like
so I can kind of
faith.
explain this. Comes kind of from the William F. Buckley version of conservatism, the original version of conservatism, I suppose, but that it's almost kind of alarming, and I'm going to call out this, and it's controversial to many people, but my belief is public schools should be teaching Christianity, not as an indoctrination that you must become a Christian or trying to convert people, but almost as a history course, as a humanities course. So they understand, what the founders were thinking at the time, because this gives the context to all of these different things, freedom. I think if you taught simply, simple tenets of Christianity, like you're made in God's image, you'd realize, racism is probably a bad thing, considering I'm hating on someone else, even though they're made in the same image of God that I am. Right. That's the best argument to me. I mean, to me, that's the only argument against racism. That's the best one. So I think if you teach that, because when we were talking before, you're talking about how, the CRT type stuff, this is a religion, right? They have their own doctrines. They have their own beliefs. They have their own high priests, if you will, which is
rituals.
the most right. And so they're allowed to teach that religion in a secular institution. But the problem is, how do we fight back against that? Is it to say this is a religion and it's bad? To me, that's gonna kind of go halfway. I don't think that's going to be totally effective. What I think would be a better option, actually, to teach a religion, to teach, what aided in the founding of this country, the principles that kind of led to, the way we look at individual freedom and individual liberty, and being able to use that as a competing religion toward what they're teaching in a secular way with CRT, because now you have something to base because right now you have no baseline. You don't recognize this in a religion if you're going to a secular school, because you have nothing to base it against, unless you're a religious person outside of school.
True. But here's the problem I have, though, is doing it that way as like an in addition to. I mean, I'm a hardliner. I don't think that CRT should be taught in schools, period. Because especially in K-12, I think if you want to have a college class where you discuss it as a theory, just like I'm sure they have conversations about Marxism. I'm sure they have conversations about postmodernism, and they learn about these things. I mean, okay, because by then, when you're over 18, and presumably you have a few tools in your tool bag that kids K through 12 do not have. Number one is you can read. Like you can read proficiently if you're in college. Okay. Yeah. Secondly, you're already in an academic mindset. You're in a college, so you're in an academic environment where you understand that you can have conversations without necessarily internalizing what you're learning about. You're just discussing it, weighing, comparing, contrasting, and experimenting with different thoughts and so forth. And I still think they're bad, but freedom of speech and academic freedom, I understand that at least bring to the table the tools with which you would need to critically think about critical theory. Problem with K through 12 is you don't have that. Your brain is not fully developed until you're a senior anyway, to even begin to start critically thinking about critical theory. You don't have proficiency in reading. You don't have proficiency in math to question the statistics that are being tossed out at you. You don't know enough about the scientific method to understand what is a well-constructed research experiment or whatever, and what isn't, like what the difference between qualitative and quantitative research even is, that causation and correlation are two different things, and so forth. So you don't come to the discussion with your teacher ready to discuss anything. All you're able to do is take what they say as faith. It's like, oh, this is so. Okay, systemic racism is true. Okay. You don't even know enough as a third grader or even a 10th grader to say, can you define systemic racism for me? And can you show me, kind of quantify it for me? I bet if you ask 12 different teachers, you get 12 different answers to that question. And so, but the kids don't even know the question. Because when you start teaching it in kindergarten, they won't even have the inclination to ask the question. It's going to be like teaching them the sky is blue and the sun comes up in the east and systemic racism is real.
I haven't met many 8-year-olds who ask for supporting evidence when you throw a claim at them. So
but yeah, totally how many of them go like,
that point.
How do we know the sky is blue? No, I mean, how do we know the earth is round? No, we tell them things and they accept it. Critical thinking is something you're taught to do. And the way you teach it is not how they're doing critical race theory. Critical thinking is saying I'll give you an example. If you went into a class of, let's say, middle schoolers and you say, here's the statistic about how many people are in prison based on race. Okay. Based on the race. There are this many people, this percentage of people are Black and this percentage are white and this percentage are Hispanic, whatever. Now, why do you think there's a big difference between the races? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And the kids, I mean, they might be like, I don't know, but who knows what they'll come up with, right? Mm-hmm. And then when they throw something out, you say, okay, why do you say that? What makes you think that? Well, how could you find that out? How could you get some more information to see if you're right? How could you test that out? Where would you look? How would you know that's a good place to look? So in other words, you're asking questions so that the kid has to think about their answers and test out their own answers. You don't come back and say, wrong. That's not true. The reason is racism. But that's what critical race theory does. First of all, they don't start with the question. They say things like, so in what ways does this number reflect how racist our society is? And so the kid's like, but it does. I mean, it doesn't leave any room for critical thinking because you're not asking them any questions that they have to actually think about the answers to and go find out more information. So,
well, I think too, just to kind of build an analogy is I have a math degree, and everyone starts out, very simple math. And if you ever go through an equation, the funny thing is, especially in engineering school, they'll give you an equation. It's like, all right, this is the equation. These are the variables you need to know to understand, what's going to happen here. And in your intro classes, it's just like, all right, here's this one variable will give you one answer in this expression. And as you go further, they add on variables because what you're doing is you're actually controlling other things by making them constants. Basically, if you want to figure out how fast this car is going, in your intro class, you're ignoring drag, you're ignoring, wind resistance and weight and all these different things. And as you progress, you add those on because now you're more competent in this. What they're doing here is they're saying, here's your disparity and your only variable we're going to give you is race. Well, what's the answer going to be? Every single thing's be based on race, but now you expand out that expression and you add more variables to it. And this is called, multivariate analysis, where people are doing single variable analysis and they come up with these simple conclusions that are way too simple to be true. And you expand it out, the more you can learn, the more you kind of see this full expression for what it is. And you can now encompass all these different variables that'll give you the full picture of what you should be looking at. Yeah.
And that's my problem with it is, that first of all, I disagree with the premise. I think the premise is actually relatively easy to prove false. I disagree with the way they have redefined words to make the premise workable. If they were still using the original definitions of racism and the original definition of discrimination and the original definition of systemic, or diversity for that matter, or equity, if they used the original dictionary definitions of these words, nothing they're saying would make any sense at all. Would make zero sense. So they have gone and changed the definitions so that now what they're saying makes sense. And if you call them on the areas where it still doesn't really hold water, they'll just tweak the definition again. So they just keep moving the goalpost because they're leading with a conclusion. And that's not scientific. That's not what theories do. Theories don't say, I conclude X, and now everything you say is proof that I'm right. Doesn't matter what you say. There's proof that I'm right. And we are teaching our children not only to be incredibly intolerant and incredibly arrogant. They won't have what Godstead calls epistemic humility. I think also Greg Lukianoff talks about that. But epistemic humility is what you absolutely must have as a teacher, especially a teacher of something like social science. Okay. There's no excuse whatsoever for a teacher to walk into a classroom feeling like they have the answer to a social science question. First of all, you don't necessarily exist except for your own personal life, you don't exist in the real world of markets and work and all of that. You're in academia. And I've been there. I worked there. So I know the difference between being there and in the outside world of work and production. And you might as well be on Mars. I mean, it's a very insulated, isolated little world where things don't work the same way they work in the outside world. The incentives are all different. The rewards are completely different. Everything is completely different, to the point where I sometimes think teachers are aliens. Like, people have spent their entire career in academia. It's like talking to somebody from a foreign planet. But when they start to talk about how the world works, I want to be like, yeah, no, honey.
Yeah, there are a million analogies here I can go with engineering, because there's an engineering, I used to work a lot in labor, and I know a lot of laborers who are like, I hate engineers because they make these things that don't make any sense because they've never had hands on the ground. They've never actually had to implement any of the stuff they're doing. And, it's kind of the difference between like an engineer and an analyst. The analyst analyzes, but if the analyst has had no hands-on experience in how to do it, they don't know what they're doing. They're just playing in theory, and they normally transpose what they think ought to happen onto what is happening in that way. So, it's extremely difficult to translate any useful information to someone else who's actually trying to do that thing.
Right.
Sure.
And that's why when I ask questions like, how does this help a child learn? No, tell me, like, how adding critical race theory to any subject, to the class day at all, even as an add-on, as an extracurricular, how is this helping the child whose primary goal, and especially K-5, is to learn to read and do math proficiently enough to function in middle school and high school? Okay, so we're actually learning the skills that we will learn so that we can learn. That's where K through 5 is, I'm learning the skills of learning.
Right.
That is not the place to take up anyone's time with all this other stuff. Like, it makes no sense. Like, to my way of thinking, the only thing they should be doing there is, learning how to learn. So all those basic skills, because without them, you can't do anything after that. And playing, just becoming social skills, learning how to just get along with other people, learn how to treat other people properly. And this is where they really get in the way and don't seem to be teaching child psychology anymore, like child development or anything to do with how small children up to the age of 10 actually think. And that's the area where I had my greatest expertise. I taught first and second grade, and I worked in the K through 5 setting, even though my master's was K through 8. And I feel like these people are talking about, no, we must teach this in, K through, and I'm like, why are you teaching this age group? Because their priorities and your priorities, like, you're actually interfering in a major way. You're doing significant harm to the formation of their identities. First of all, identity formation begins at 10. It begins at 10. Up until 10, your identity is basically like, I'm, a daughter, a sister, a cousin, that, like, your identity is all the people that you are in relation to your family and maybe your immediate community and your friends and so forth. And it's very, very personal. It's really like in that little realm, and very much tied to the people who care about you and love you. So that might be your parents, might be your grandparents, might be your, your aunties if you don't have parents, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be mom and dad, but it's your caregivers, your immediate caregivers. Like, your identity is in relation to that little world in which you inhabit for the most part. You might look at popular culture and be like, I want to be like that, or I see myself like that a little bit, but it's not the driver yet.
So when you say identity, how damaging could something like CRT that teaches you that your identity is part of, like, skin color is the most important thing to you?
Incredibly damaging.
Yeah, exactly.
You're giving a child who is still, they have to go through the individuation process on their own, and it's a herky-jerky process. If you go through it with a child, you have a daughter, right? Do you have a daughter?
Son and a daughter.
Son and a daughter. Okay. And how old is your daughter?
She's 8.
Okay. So soon enough, about 10 or 11, you will start to see the herky jerky like, oh, I love you. I hate you. I love you. I hate you. Like, it's like this, like.
Started like 5 years ago.
But but it becomes a really big push me, pull you game where they're trying to figure out, who am I separate and apart from mom and dad and my family? They start to move towards the peer group and towards society and away from the safety net of like who I am as someone loved by mom and dad or whoever. And so if somebody comes in the middle of that process and puts a wedge between the nuclear family or the family unit and that where they feel safe and cared for. And I'm talking about the majority. Obviously, we know there are outliers tragically who don't have that situation, but why would you want equity in that regard? Okay. Right. So you come in and you say, no, your identity is all of the first things you didn't choose. You didn't choose. So you're stuck. Okay. Whatever it is, you're stuck with it. The second thing is that it's externalized. It's completely externalized. So you give a young child with their identity and their sense of self is beginning to form, and you give them an external locus of control when everything about psychology tells us that is the exact opposite of what you need to teach children in order for them to become self-confident, self-aware, responsible, productive individuals. They were going to go live their lives and hopefully be happy and able to weather the storms of life. Okay. If you have an external locus of control, you are immediately vulnerable. You're vulnerable. The only thing that's going to protect you against peer pressure to do things you ought not do, against people who might want to exploit you and take advantage of you and manipulate you and so forth, is that internal core, that locus of control that says, I am me and I matter and I have these boundaries that I've decided for myself, and there are going to be consequences for people who violate them. Either I withdraw myself away from these people, or I'm going to call the cops, or whatever it is. But if you tell somebody that how they are perceived by the group, how they fit into the group, whether the group approves of them or confers, like it just gives them approval, is what matters most. They're sitting ducks to be used and manipulated. That's what cults do. That's literally what cults do. They wear you down. They separate you from your family. They separate you from the people who give you strength in yourself and love you unconditionally the way you are, whatever, all warts and all. Okay. Your goofy opinions and all. And they tell you there's a right way to think and a right way to be. And this is how it is. And if you don't do it, you won't be accepted. And if you're not accepted, bad things are going to happen. That's what cults do.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about before we started the live stream about the self-importance of these teachers. And I think you kind of hit on that in that, these teachers kind of are taking, whether they want to consciously or not, are assuming the role of caregiver, educator, and now parent. Yes. And I think that's where that self-importance is driven from. They think they need to prescribe the sense of identity onto the child because that should really be coming from the family, the traditions, everything that they do in the family unit, but now is getting kind of moved. And I think this is not only a problem with education, but also a problem with parenting. And we kind of hit on this in our first episode, but kind of the parents freely willing to give up their parental responsibilities to educators because they just don't want the responsibility, or they've been indoctrinated themselves believing that this is the process they ought to take rather than developing the child within the family.
The experts.
Exactly. And really, I think that sense of self-importance, because we both agreed on this right away, that, how do we socially value teachers right now? How do we think we're told to value teachers? Right up there with first responders. Exactly. They're up there with, firefighters, police officers, and now police officers are way below them, but traditionally looked at like police officers, like your teacher right now in 2021 is looked at the same way as a firefighter running into the Twin Towers in 9/11. That's how they're looked at right now. And I think this is a kind of a weird way of them always saying that they're put in harm's way, especially with COVID. It's like, I'm jumping in here when no one else is willing to, but really the teachers unions didn't allow them to jump in there.
They act like they work at the grocery store.
Right. And I mean, it's just this kind of weird value system we have. And, I've talked to you about this before that, I got an email saying, well, we're going to have Teacher Appreciation Day. We're going to set up all the signs in the yard and say how much we appreciate the teachers. And my response was like, this seems like you guys are giving yourself a participation trophy for a subpar year in education. Why would you be doing this? If anything, it should be reversed. Teachers should be making signs for the kids for giving up a year of education.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just seems so topsy turvy. Like, why should these people be praised any more than a garbage collector? I use that as an example. If you're talking about respect, I respect anyone who does their job. And if you do your job, you're willing to do your job, you earn my respect. Now, is it the same as a police officer or firefighter? Not exactly. I'm sorry. You're not quite there yet. But like, why is there this sense of self-importance developed?
Well, I
so
think
hard in an educator?
it's a combination of factors. One is that we have, through popular culture, government, et cetera, and so forth, the marketing of education has been like, teachers are heroes, like first responders. Also, the fact that parents do rely on schools for childcare. That's just a fact. It just is. Increasingly, both parents need to work. If you're a single parent, you absolutely need the school, right? I mean, that's what people believe. That's what they've been told to believe. And so these are the people looking after your kids. And I think you've got a combination of factors. You've got a little bit of like a Stockholm syndrome of like, my most precious, my babies are in the care of these people all day. So there's a sense of like, I appreciate that because I need to. I have to believe in them. I have to believe that they're good people. I have to believe that they're decent and loving and caring and kind and have my kids' best interests at heart. Because if I don't, I won't be able to function at work. I won't be able to do what I have to do to put a roof over our head and food on the table. I'm going to be a constant basket case. So I'm going to go ahead and project onto them that which I hope they are, because that's my child in there. And then you have the other side. You have people who kind of know it's not really kind of true, but they're afraid that if they don't at least give the like, oh, teacher, the respect of, oh, yes, you're the expert and I must respect you, that somehow there'll be backlash against their kid. So they have a different sense of the authority of the teacher of like, this person has authority over my child all day. I better treat them well. I better respect them. I better buy them a good appreciation gifts. I better show up with the wipes and the paper and the pencils and all the things when they ask me to, and then maybe they'll take extra good care of my baby. There's so much going on emotionally for the parent to have to leave their child at these schools. That's why I ask for a lot of grace for parents. When people want to pick on parents, and it's parenting, it's bad parenting, parents are lazy, parents are this, parents are that. I'm like, back off. Because first of all, a lot of these parents, most of them went to the same schools. So they were trained in the same mindset. They're propagandized constantly that these people are saints and saviors and, goddesses and all this and experts who know better than they do. And like I said, they have custody of your child all day long. It is it's tough. Like people told me I was crazy when I would go into the school and be like, bang, 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 I have to talk to you. I wasn't that rude. Obviously I wasn't that rude, but at first, but people would be like, they've got your kids. I literally had people saying, I can't join you because what's going to happen to my child? I'm like, if you sincerely believe that they're capable of doing something to your child because you spoke out on behalf of your child, maybe it's time for you to leave. Like maybe you need to pull your kid. Like even I didn't think they would be that bad. I thought maybe they'd be chastened. In fact, like maybe they're cavalier about how they treat my kid now. But if they see that I'm onto them and they see that I'm watching, maybe they'll back off and stop bullying my kid. And actually it turned out I was right in that regard. It was just too little too late. But I think people sincerely believe that. Like I said, it's like a little Stockholm syndrome, or they're the kind of people who just respect authority because it's authority. And there's a lot of people in America like that right now. We have that whole white lab coat thing with Dr. Fauci. Oh my gosh, Dr. Fauci, tell me when it's okay for me to live my life. I mean, I'm actually shocked how many Americans fall into that category. It's an alarming number. So it's that same mindset that thinks, oh my gosh, that turns to the teacher and says, oh yes, you're a hero. It really is not that different. It's not that different.
Yeah, it's a strange kind of value adjustment I think we've had in America, where we're more comfortable. Like there's kind of this weird feeling that If someone says, I want to get rid of public education, they're like, well, then the kids are left up to the means of their parents. And like, some
Oh my
parents are just
gosh.
bad. And it's
Oh
like,
no.
like
Except
at
the
what
ones who
point,
take except the
at
ones
what,
who take the word of their 2-year-old that he doesn't want to be he anymore. He wants to be a
oh,
she.
well, that's the perfect example of that. And
Yeah.
it's just
They're
like,
okay.
at what point, again, if you want to be honest about, your argument in general, if you say there are some bad parents out there, but you don't believe that there are bad teachers out there, your premise is wrong, right? And it's just this, and even believing the other way and saying there's no such thing as a good teacher and there are no such thing as a bad parent. Both of those extreme cases are wrong, but for some reason we don't trust parents to parent children. For some reason we don't think that, again, there are outliers here. We're not saying there aren't outliers and people
Because
don't get abused as children by their parents, but as a general rule, it's probably a safer bet that the parents are going to care for the well-being of their children more
this
than
is
a
why you have to
stranger.
get down to core principles. And the core principle in the United States of America, and it's the one that guarantees the greatest degree of freedom for the largest majority of people. So in other words, the highest degree of equity, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, is that we do have this thing called due process. We do give people, including parents, the benefit of the doubt, and they have inalienable rights. And one of those rights as a parent is you have parental rights. That's your child. And just because your child is in the care of the school does not mean that they're now the parent. And the government's been creeping and creeping and creeping more into that relationship every year to the point of getting downright big brother creepy about it. And parents, I think, haven't realized until it comes into their life, like, oh my God, I didn't know you could do this, which is one of the things I tell people. If you're squeamish about having government in your life, in your personal life, like up in your business, you really should think about homeschooling. Not because you want to abuse your child, but because the second you put your child in the care of the school, they now assume the right to, like, oh, Johnny had a bruise on his hand. We're sending the social worker. Johnny looks a little thin. We're sending the social worker. Johnny said you spanked him. We're sending the social worker. I mean, you could suddenly find yourself on the receiving end of an investigation because the school started it. And sometimes the schools start these investigations as a punitive action to parents who are a little too uppity about what they're doing in the classroom. So that's why I tell you, if you're the kind of person who's going to be very involved and you want to be looking over their shoulder and doing stuff, just understand that they've got your kid there for X hours in a day and they have a certain measure of power to mess up your life. Now, they could find nothing, but in the meantime, there was an investigation because the teacher did it or whatever. They can do that. And they've been doing that more and more and more. And parents have not organized or unified or anything to fight back. That's why I say it's not just CRT, guys. It's the government is creeping and creeping and creeping into your life. And one of the reasons they're pushing back now, as you're pushing back on CRT, is they're all indignant. Like, how dare you tell us how to teach our children? It's like, perhaps you forgot there are children. Yeah, there are kids. And so it's this obsession with expertise, this obsession with, we're better than you. So the fundamental principle is we have individual liberty. You give benefit of the doubt. You have to have due process. You must bring evidence before you come into my home, before you come between me and my child. So with things even like diversity training, people are saying, well, let's substitute a different kind. I'm like, no, that you should have to show that either my child or this grade full of children or whatever it is has been behaving in racist ways, has been like overtly racist or been bullying somebody. And even then, you should take those specific children for specialized cultural literacy training or whatever it is, because they've obviously demonstrated they need it. They're not treating people properly. You don't take the entire school, presume them all to be racist, and subject them to this training. So even if we really believed, that there were some people in the school who are racist, we don't take all the people in the whole school and treat them like they're the worst kind of racist. And so the core principle is due process. You don't get to jump ahead and treat us all like we're guilty of child abuse. We're guilty of being white supremacist, horrible, evil racist. We're sitting home going, now the Black people are really bad and you need to hate them. Like, that's how they're treating our kids. Like, if they don't intercede, our children are going to be little racist, or if they don't intercede, those children aren't going to know that they're victims. Imagine if you're a Black parent and you're trying to just raise your kid. Just raise your kid to be a, self-motivated kid with a lot of self-confidence, going to school. I'm going to do well. I'm going to get good grades. I'm going to study, whatever. And the teacher comes and says, well, because of the color of your skin, you're a victim. And you're a victim to people who look like that. And that's your best friend, right? And I was like, the white kid across. And he's an oppressor and you're a victim. And your parent has told you the exact opposite. You're nobody's victim. You're free. You just keep on keeping on and you go do what you got to do and don't let anyone get in your way and you'll be fine and so forth. And I back you up. And now the teacher's going, no, that's not true. So either way, these teachers are taking on the role of values instructor away from the parents. And it's wrong. It's not about like, I'm losing my white power and I don't want them to do it. It's like, no, I'm losing my parental power. And guess what? I have a right to that. You don't.
Yeah. There's actually an incident that just happened just recently out where I live. And there was some Snapchat group going along and maybe young high school kids. There's one Black girl in the chat, and then it was basically people trolling, and they started out with like Trump jokes, and then they eventually moved to racism, saying like some actual awful stuff. And, that's an example of tell the parents, what's the order of operations here if a teacher finds that on a kid's phone? Yeah. Call the parents and you address it with the parents, because the parents should be the ones addressing this because they're the authority figures in their life. What happened was they may have done this. Now I know kind of little about this story, but the names of the kids or their Snapchat names are posted on Facebook. That's what happened. And now these kids, including the girl who was bullied in that situation, was awful for her, are like all over Facebook. And now they're in the courtroom of public appeal, which is, the mob in a very progressive place. And, do we think, is this a good idea? Again, I don't know if like a teacher posted this, so I'm not trying to accuse a school of anything like that, but I did get an email, even though this happened in high school. It went out to the whole school district about, more training that they're going to do now to avoid this in the future. And to talk about it or something like that, I get that. But now a wide scale training to go over something that we know very little about, or might have just been like these kids trolling, which again is awful. What they said was awful, disgusting, and the parents should address it. But now it has become a whole citywide issue because of an awful incident.
And I mean that's the thing is they're doing too much, and they've been empowered to do too much. And again, people keep blaming the parents and saying, well, the parents are asking them to, and there may be a subset of parents who have been doing that. But I actually think if I think back in time to like when I was a kid in public school and so forth, I don't see it that way. I remember being in graduate school learning how to be a teacher, like I said, in the late 80s. And they made it very clear that the agenda was for the teachers that we were doing something political, that teaching was a political act, and that, it was up to us to go in. There was this sense of like saviorism, I didn't agree with it. I didn't like it, but I foolishly, naively thought I could just leave it at the door. Like, whatever, that's their point of view. I just figured it's University of Pennsylvania. They're very left leaning. I don't have to do that. I still saw it as like optional or the point of view of my professor. I didn't see it as like increasingly the zeitgeist of, what was and now I realize like, no, that wasn't just that professor. It was probably thousands and thousands of professors the country over. And now you have, as Carlin has pointed out, you've got millions of teachers who probably don't know how to teach any other way, who actually have been self-selected, in other words, they're still in teaching as opposed to having left. They're still there in part because they are collectivists. They do believe that there are cogs in this larger, greater good machine, and that it's their job to mold and shape your child to fit in their little cocoon in the matrix, and stay plugged in. No red pilling for you. And that's how I see it. And so, I want to address something that somebody said up in here. If I can do it. This person says, whoops. They say, the more I listen to you guys and all the other videos, the more I'm convinced we should not fight this. Instead, let any parent that wants to teach their kids this crap be allowed. Well, see, here's the thing, radical moderate. they can and always have been able to teach their kids this stuff at home. But when you say let the parents teach, no one's stopping them as it is. Like, this will never be outlawed in your private home. But
Hopefully.
what's happening is tax dollars, money that, I don't even use the schools. And even though I have kids this age, that our tax dollars are paying to teach children how to hate their country, hate their family, hate the Constitution, hate themselves. I mean, it's a whole lot of negativity going on that goes way beyond those individual parents. No one would ever step in and tell these parents, you can't do this at home. And it's just that we don't think the government should be using tax money to do it for them. They don't have a right to use my money to teach kids their values. That would be exactly the same as if a bunch of people went into the school, a bunch of teachers who were Catholic went into a secular public school and said, we think the right way to live is for kids to be Catholic, and we're going to teach them all to be Catholic. I'm sure the Catholic parents would be like, this is awesome.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, this is great. But the people who are not Catholic will be like, what? So they can do whatever they want. They can make a private school for CRT immersion if that's what they want. Knock yourself out. Same with any other religion, because it is a religion, what they're doing. It's actually not even a religion, because religion has redemption. In religion, you can be forgiven, or you can...
I call it a corrupt religion that
Yeah.
acts as a parasite. It's a mind virus.
It just kills the host. There's no, like, even in Judaism, where we don't really have like a heaven, or we don't really have a sort of forgiveness concept, but there is at least the idea that there's secular life and spiritual life. They have sort of a wall between them. And with cults, there's no difference. A cult is like, the religion is your life, is everything you do is one. And you can't step outside the lines. If you do, you're cast out. And that's what CRT is. They cast you out. They tell you what the right think and wrong think is. So it's a cult. It is absolutely a cult.
So I'm going to dive into this a bit more in one of my later posts. I'm trying to kind of differentiate the difference between cult and religion. I would say this acts as a religion, not if you're going to separate what cult is as part of culture. And what a religion is, I would describe this as a corrupt religion because of the aspect you just said. There's no road to redemption here. Everyone just gets thrown under the bus, and you can become an ally, but you can't really join the religion.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems I misunderstood. Okay, he says you misunderstood. I mean, have two schools, one that teaches that crap and the other school across the street that teaches real stuff. And then in a generation, it will fail itself out. Yeah, well, again, it's tax money.
That's the competing free market idea. Unfortunately, This isn't a free market. This is the fixed part of the market. So there's a bit of corruption here. But even to me, so I know you kind of mentioned the term academic freedom. This is something that I don't agree with. I don't think academic freedom is a good idea because we conflate it with viewpoint diversity. I don't think, just as you say, we shouldn't be teaching Catholicism as an indoctrination factory as a course. We shouldn't be doing the same thing with Marxism, which they do in university, right? So, there is stuff that we ought not to teach. And if you ask a parent, should they be allowed to teach Nazism, not the history of the Nazis, but the ideology and the doctrines of Nazism, every rational parent would be like, no, there shouldn't even be a vote on this. It should just be flat out, no, you're not allowed to teach kids how to be a Nazi.
I think this is like a little semantic misunderstanding in the sense, because I understand academic freedom. When I hear the academic component, it's more like study of, not teaching of. Like, so in other words, if you say we're going to have academic freedom and we're going to look at Nazism, it's not, we're going to look at it as like an equally competing idea of like, hey, Nazism might be a good idea. We're going to look at it as like, let's study what made it tick, how it came about, whatever. We're not going to like, oh, we never talk about Nazism, right? So you have academic freedom to actually learn about it. And there may be that crazy person who in the class about how Nazism came to be decides that it was a good idea. Okay. I mean, that could happen, I guess, but you certainly don't order your life around that. You teach about it. I took a class on the era of Hitler. We learned all about the origin of his views and where he got his ideas and all this kind of stuff. And obviously it wasn't taught from the point of view of like any of it was good, but we learned in detail what it was and how it was. And when I hear academic, I hear that more than, so let's look at how great, let's look at Nazism as just another competing idea of way to run the world. Like, to me, that's not academic freedom. That's more like, I don't know what that is. I don't know
Yeah, I
that I
think
would
it's close. And then if we
put
were to
that in
use
there.
that definition, then I agree with you there. But if we take, I mean, Nazism again, the swastika. It's amazing to me how the swastika is seen as this evil symbol, but the hammer and sickle is not.
I
Like
know, right?
how it's okay to walk around with the hammer and sickle on your shirt, but it's not okay with a swastika. And it's not me advocating that you should be walking around with either. It's both are disgusting.
Yeah.
But I mean, we do teach basically open Marxism here as a competing ideology, and that's something that's like a
Yes,
no
we
brainer.
do.
Don't do
And,
that. Don't do
and if
that. And
if it were up to me, like honestly, I would take it far. That's why I say it's not enough to fight critical race theory. And I'm seeing so many people, well-meaning people who are organizing and discussing with each other of like, how do we fight this thing? And they're like, hey, does anybody have the name of a better diversity trainer so we can get another diversity trainer into our school? And I'm like, no. Why don't you question the premise of whether you need to teach your K through 12 student diversity training in the first place? It's up for debate whether corporations need to reflexively do this training. Now, there are some settings I think where it can be really useful and helpful if you have an extremely demographically diverse workforce, you work internationally, or you have cultures that are going to be different that have to work together and understand each other and they might have some different norms. Then you want to have something called cultural literacy training, where I actually know a woman who does that for adults, and that's a completely different animal. That's not diversity training. That's not even cultural sensitivity training. That's just cultural literacy. But little kids, first of all, one of the core skills of being an adult is working it out, figuring it out. You're going to have to go out in the world and at any given day bump into people who don't look like you, don't think like you, don't come from the same world as you. And if you need somebody every single year to come in and like teach you how to function with other people, and these are the things to say and these are the things not to say, not only are you going to become a neurotic in about 5 minutes who doesn't talk to anybody because you're like, I haven't been taught yet the right things to say. That might be the wrong thing to say. You know what? They don't look like me. They don't come from the same world as me. I'm not going to talk to them because I might screw up. You're literally creating neurosis where it doesn't need to be, and they're not learning that vitally important skill of stumble trip. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. That's okay, you didn't know, and that's good. What you know, these are social skills. Kids have to stumble and fall down and screw up and hurt somebody's feelings or get their feelings hurt a little bit when it's not intentional. They learn vital skills, resiliency, toughness, grit.
you need to
Okay.
allow for microaggressions.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I've had this argument and
Yes.
this pushback in the PTO meeting where they're teaching this to high schoolers. I'm like, they're way past this. Like they go on to Twitter and it's a microaggression city just down their feed, and that's a good thing. Expose yourself to some of these bad ideas, and although none of us as parents want our children to go through tragedy, typically when that happens, you know,
Yeah.
they're going to grow from that. They're not going to cower
Yeah.
and you know, create a shell around themselves. Is they need to be exposed to some harsh criticism if they expect to interact with the world. Because to me, you know, younger education is to teach you how to think. Upper education is to teach you how to become a productive member of society, like how to function, to give you life skills.
Right.
And the problem is we're still teaching academics at that point.
But it's intentional. See, and this is the thing, like, you know, Truman says, everything serves theory. And, you know, this is what I want to tell parents and the people pushing back is understand that if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. So you can't say, well, let's do it a different way because they'll figure out a way to have that serve theory. What is theory? Theory is that the country is systemic, you know, is founded as a white supremacist nation. It's rotten to the core. We need to tear it down, you know, from the foundation, just demolish the whole thing, replace it with something. No, we hadn't really considered that, but we need to tear it down. And so how we do that is we separate you from your family of origin. We separate you from yourself. We put you in a group. We make it easy to identify you and identify others because then we can, you know, we can play you against each other. It's all political. And the people who benefit are the people who are already in power. What kills me is how many people who call themselves progressive and anti-one percenters and anti, you know, whatever, who are literally in service 100% to the almighty state right now. What they are doing is setting up a divide and conquer worldview and leading our kids to the slaughter. They are making them into little neurotic people who are absolutely incapable of defending themselves against bad ideas or even bad people. They can't. And they're so fixated on what's right in front of them that they can't see what's going on out there. And we're not helping our children. We're not protecting them from anything. We're not protecting Black children. We're not protecting white children. It's not about save the white kids. It's about save the kids, period, from what is essentially political warfare. It's like psyops in service to politics. And I know people want to brand it as it's Marxist, whatever, but that's overly simplistic. I don't even want to go there. It's the state. The state benefits the people already in power, the elect, as John McWhorter calls them, whatever you want to call them. It's not you. Chances are it's not you. And if you think that because you're espousing the right ideas or you're in the cool kid club or all the blue checks agree with you, that somehow you're going to come out on top in the end, I suggest you pick up some history books and read about what happened to the Bolsheviks, or read about what happened to Mao's little Red Guard, or read about what happened to Pol Pot's little people or whatever. No, you're not going to come out on top in this. So you might want to start thinking about protecting yourself and your own children from bad ideas, because these are really, really bad ones.
Yeah.
These are bad.
Yeah. I mean, it just taking a step back and kind of looking at these things is, especially like you mentioned before, if anyone ever says speaking truth to power, they're probably the powerful, speaking their truth to the blind. And it's, Truman's lighting up the comments here because we've had a lot of past discussions based on this about
There's so many good ones here.
that they don't, when you're in a corrupt hierarchy, the feature of the corrupt hierarchy that maintains its corruption is it does not allow for negative feedback into the system. Right. And so if the people who are saying keep speaking truth to power, they're the powerful people who are already established. They're already in there. And they're just like, help me maintain power. This is all I want, is just keep coming.
And this is what I've been saying, is it's a lot more like fascism. It's not, Marxism loves the working class. These people hate the working class.
Well,
they hate them.
There's also a very communism and fascism are they're close to being the same thing. They're one step away. Just one is like overt control that says these are the rules, you must follow them, and the other one says there are no rules, but there's a gun behind my back, and if you don't follow the rules, I'm going to shoot you. Like that. That's exactly the only difference between the two.
Exactly.
The only difference between the Nazis.
Hitler was just kind of like, I don't want to run the factories. I'd want to run the people who run the factories.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh, it's all you guys, and that's why. I mean, it's considered right wing in Europe, but would not be considered right wing in the U.S. because
that's why the Chinese are not communists anymore. The CCP is just a name they keep, but there are communists within China who are pissed off because they're not communist enough. They actually run the country like they're fascists because they allow private ownership. It's just that the government has to have a backdoor into all their technology. The government has to tell them what to do every minute of every day, and they regulate everything. I mean, the company I work for, I can't teach kids above a certain or below a certain age after a certain hour. Like the government has decided that parents can't have their kids up past X hour to take a class. Like the government says so. Can you imagine the federal government saying, oh, your child is under the age of 12. They can't stay up past 8 p.m.
Yeah. I mean, think those rules are more for the teachers. They don't want to stay up past 8 p.m.
I would have thought so, but it's all American. It's American and Canadian teachers. So it's not 8 p.m. for us. So it's kind of like we lost. It used to be okay. And then the government came in and said, nope, we're making a new rule. They can't do it. So I don't know why, but they control so many aspects of their lives. And yet, they're not communists per se. They don't own all the means of production. So it's not quite like that. It's just that's the name of the party. It's been that name for so long. It's very insular, like the Communist Party was. You have to be asked to join and, all this kind of stuff. But it's doesn't function like a communist system. And I think we're moving more towards being like China 2.0 than like Soviet Union 2.0.
Yeah. I mean, I hope we're far away from there, but even ideologies have to evolve. Communism probably is not going to come around in the same form we saw in the Soviet Union. Needs to evolve in some way in order to adapt to the reality of today. So it's really hard to throw people in gulags when they can just whip their phone out and video all these people who are standing in the gulag, right? So you can't really do that, but you can put them in the ideological gulag of saying, if this person has a right-wing point of view, meaning I'm against CRT, so it can mean any liberal out there, they're going to be stuck in this ideological gulag of not having acceptable opinions anymore because they have this one opinion that runs against now the
Right.
facts that we give you now, which the fact is we live in a systemically racist country.
Right. And that's why, I said I'll kind of bring it full circle back to the beginning, which is that, if you're currently fighting critical race theory and you are, you think that like this is the thing you need to get rid of. I guess I just want to make sure you're aware that it's not. That they will change the wording, they'll change the names, they'll move the pieces around on the chessboard, they'll just call it something different. What you're up against is not critical race theory is just it's kind of like one iteration that we can very clearly see. It's now kind of bubbled up. But you're really sort of playing whack-a-mole, because even if you get rid of this, you've still got millions of teachers who believe in it. They're not going anywhere. What, are you going to fire them all? They're not going anywhere. So some of them have already said, we're going to teach it anyway. Who's going to enforce it? We know that the government schools already violate IDEA, and that's federal law. Their parents have to sue, and they often lose. I just went over that in a video this week about how the parents are the only watchdogs of the IDEA, and they lose their lawsuits like at least half the time, if not more. Districts would rather litigate than educate. And so they're going to do the same thing with critical race. They're just going to get in there like, I got your kid for 8 hours. I've got gatekeeping policies where you can't just waltz into my classroom. You need to fill out a form to get information on what I'm teaching at least 2 weeks in advance. And guess what? I'm not going to put it on paper anymore. I'm just going to stand in front of the room and write it on a whiteboard from memory. And your kid can't bring a cell phone and can't record me. And so, sucks to be you. I'm going to do what I want in my classroom. And oh, well. So you're fighting a worldview. You're fighting an ideology. You're fighting a philosophy. So the only way you're actually going to beat it is if you develop and hone and nurture a competing philosophy that empowers you to help your children, not just to somehow get through this if they have to go into this nightmare, but to actually put your priorities where they need to be to not use the damn school in the first place. And that sounds very scolding of me, and I'm very sorry to sound that way, but I really believe that when your philosophy guides you and your philosophy is antithetical to what they're doing in schools, it will be an easy decision. It'll be a very easy decision. You won't have to go, oh gosh, well, how am I going to not use the school? You're going to be like, of course I'm not going to use the school. I'm going to literally rearrange my entire existence around not using the school, because I would no more put my kid in that school than I would drop them off at the Hitler Youth.
Yeah. I mean, we put ourselves in a tough spot, but luckily, I mean, I know you have a hard stop coming up, but I think it's a good spot to, mention maybe your only avenue out of here is some form of homeschooling. I think you are a great resource in terms of being able to figure out how you can possibly set that up to see if it's right for you. And just like the ending question that we had, during our last conversation, I think we both agree if any 2-parent household prioritizes it high enough that you can homeschool your children.
Yeah.
And that might be your only option, but it sounds like tough work, and it will be tough work, but it's worth it in the end, because sometimes, as we're saying in the comments, sometimes you just got to let it burn. Get your kid out of the building before it burns down.
Well, or if and if things aren't quite as bad yet in your district, or there is a move, like for example, right now in North Carolina, our lieutenant governor has spearheaded something to do pretty much exactly this. It says outlawed forced public curriculum disclosure, school choice legislation, and parents collaborate for new education solutions. Just, I think today they announced in North Carolina that they are trying to, that's something else too. They're trying to, forced disclosure of curriculum materials, which is a step in the right direction. The teacher can still say what the teacher is going to say in the class, but if the parents can see what the written materials are, that is a big step in the right direction. And the other thing is school choice. If you feel like I'm not quite there yet, Deb, I really can't homeschool, whatever. I mean, I understand. Then you really need to get on board and speak up in defense of school choice. What do I mean by school choice? Dollars follow the child, not vouchers where government still gets to tell you what qualifies as school, not even necessarily charters. And some charters are excellent. I'm not going to say that they're not, but some charters are terrible. Some charters are just as bad, if not worse, than regular public schools. My kids were in one, as an example. It was more woke than woke. So it's not a panacea, but you should have the choice. You should have the choice where to send your child to school with your education dollars. So if when I say get your philosophy right, get your head straight, that it's not just CRT, it's any worldview that teaches your child that your child is not an individual, that they're part of a group, that they owe the society something. Any worldview. I don't care if they rebrand it 10 times. Remember, CRT is not the first one they've had. As Kevin's pointed out, they've been openly teaching that Marxist is a perfectly viable competing ideology. Why not? Wouldn't it be great if we could all just share everything equally? They've been teaching that in school for decades. Why do you think Marxism is so popular amongst college kids? They didn't just wake up one day and think, oh, this sounds like a good idea. That's been taught to them because they've been taught collectivism all this while. So you at home, mom and dad, have to decide, nope, I'm recommitting myself to liberalism. I'm making it part of everything I do in every aspect of my life. And I'm going to teach it to my children at home. I'm going to approach education that way. If I can't homeschool, I'm going after school choice. I'm going to run for school board. I'm going to speak out against any kind of collectivist thought, no matter who calls me names. I'm not going to stop doing it because it's not racist to defend the individual. It's ludicrous on its face to suggest that it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's the collectivism is kind of the buzzword there. I know, socialism, communism, Marxism, these words get thrown around too much because it dilutes the meaning really behind them. And that's why it's so hard as a conservative to say, oh, okay, we're moving towards socialist policy, because everyone's like, oh, he said socialist, that means he's a quack, right? But when people move toward collectivism away from the individual, and what I think is also important, away from the family unit, you see CRT types trying to break up the family. The nuclear family is no longer important. I think that is the most effective way to break down the individual, because without the family, you can't create individuals.
Every totalitarian has done that. And now we don't happen to have a strong leader in charge of this movement right now. I mean, the closest we have are sort of a high priest and high priestess. We have Kendi and D'Angelo as the sort of priest and priestess of it, but there isn't one strong charismatic leader in front of it. So I think people are less likely to recognize it as a totalitarian ideology, but it is one. And in every single case, Hannah Arendt talked about this a lot in her writings, that in every totalitarian has used education and has taken the individual away from him or herself in terms of identity and sort of oriented them toward the state, towards the collective, towards some kind of, like obligation. You're born with obligation to others. And what I keep trying to say to parents is that is incredibly dangerous, because that means your child is expendable. If they don't fulfill whatever the obligation is according to the state, and they could change it at any given moment, they're expendable.
Their ability to be sacrificed for the collective good is crazy Orwellian thinking, but this is truly what the true believer in this believes. And to get to your point with Kendi and D'Angelo, they aren't the real leaders, and that's because of the parasitic nature of this ideology. It's like, why would you want to be the leader when you know it's going to kill the host? Like they're somewhat smart enough. I don't know about some of them, but somewhat smart enough to kind of stand out of the way and be like, I'm going to be a thought leader, but treat me as a consultant, not the leader, right?
I'll take my $25,000 for my 15 minutes speaking engagement. And, and Nicole Hannah-Jones is getting her 15 minutes of fame too. So like I said, it's whether it's 1619 Project or critical race theory or whatever they're going to call it tomorrow, it's all collectivism. Racism is collectivism. Every racist that ever was is a collectivist. And so if you're really anti-racist, if you're really against all of this garbage, if you're really a liberal, then be a liberal all the way across. And that means reaching out to people who identify or whatever as conservative and going ahead and saying, yep, we at least we agree on this one front, that we want viewpoint diversity in education. So we need to link arms, and maybe it wouldn't hurt to say, I'm sorry. I once was the one calling you a right-wing crazy person. I apologize. You were right about this. You were right that there was something to be concerned about, because I really haven't seen that. And people say, oh, that's so petty of you. Why would you want that? I'm like, because you need everyone to fight this. You need everyone to feel emboldened and empowered, and that we are one nation. Again, that we are one country, e pluribus unum, right? And so you can't just keep your little cocktail party set of liberals and fight illiberalism. Demonstrate it, live it, reach across the political aisle and link arms with people who might not agree with you about everything on economics and every other thing, but who agree with you on this. And for the love of God, and this is my last thing I'm going to say, stop acting like there's a right and a wrong way to be anti-woke. I can't stand this infighting anymore. I can't. Just guys, we all have the same goal. We really do. And it's to save this republic and these ideas and the individual liberty that we cherish so much, that if somebody wants to use humor and they're not hurting you by doing it, let it go. Leave it alone. This isn't the time to be like, oh, mean tweets. I can't take it. I can't. It's know what I'm talking about. I just the sort of anti-James movement. I am firmly in the James Lindsay camp. Sue me.
Yeah. There's some petty nonsense going on, and I see it a lot coming from the conservative side. But I guess to put a bow on this, I know you're insulted by being called right wing, but we're happy to have you whenever you want to step over.
Oh, me?
Saying. Oh yeah, you.
I'm not insulted to be called right wing. I mean, I'm not insulted. It's just, if we're gonna get technical, I mean, I'm no wing, but I would rather have somebody think I'm right wing, and we're all like, but they're reaching out to me and saying, hey, we have the same goal, let's work together, than say, I can't work with you even though we have the same goal because you're right wing. What? That's how we got here.
Yeah.
That's how we got here.
And I think it's an important point, because the right wing and left, not to dive into this too, because it's more semantics. I mean, right wing and left wing changes. It flows depending on where the radical side is. And I would say right now you are a right wing in this snapshot in time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. In this snapshot of time,
But also, like the anti-vaxxers and the flat earthers are also right wing because the woke are too radical for them. Just think about that. The woke are too radical for people who think the earth is flat, and that you get better 5G service when you get vaccinated.
No way. Okay.
I mean, my cell reception got pretty good. I'm just saying.
But when you mentioned the flat earth thing, and this will be the last thing, but I actually liken critical race theory to flat eartherism in the sense of when their insistence that they have to teach it to kids because some people are racist or because there's racism out there. And I would say like, okay, well, some people believe the earth is flat. Does that mean we teach our kids about it endlessly? So make sure they don't grow up to be people who believe the earth is flat? Or do we show them a globe?
So you don't want them to walk off the edge of the earth, to be fair to them. I mean, that's terrifying.
But it's like, if you want people to be not racist, here's an idea. Don't be racist. And don't spend every waking moment talking about racism and making sure everybody knows what bucket they fall into. That's how you get more people thinking, maybe I am. So it's, we don't teach kids the earth is not flat. We just teach them this is the earth. So teach them this is the earth. It's full of people who look different and have different backgrounds and different ethnicities and have different viewpoints. And isn't it wonderful? Let's move on. That's it. That's literally all you need to do. Kids are born believing that, by the way. They have no reason not to think that until somebody steps in and teaches them otherwise.
Exactly.
So anyway.
Awesome. Well, it's a great conversation. I
all right.
enjoyed this.
Thank you for joining me in this craziness.
Will do.
All right. Open. Thank you, Kevin. Have a great night. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
All right, there it is. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know I did. Make sure to support Deb and join the Reason We Learn Locals community at thereasonwelearn.locals.com and give her a follow on Twitter at InsomnoChick, and make sure to subscribe to her YouTube channel so you can get any future live streams and all the other wonderful content she puts up there as well. And as for me, you can follow me on Twitter at ENG_politics. You can search me out on YouTube by searching Engineering Politics. You can join my ThinkSpot page by going on ThinkSpot and searching Engineering Politics. But as usual, the best way to find me, get my newest content, and support this podcast is the Engineering Politics Locals community. I strongly urge you to join this growing community at engineeringpolitics.locals.com. I appreciate your consideration. Let's build a community together. Thanks for listening. This is the Engineering Politics Podcast.